Hello and welcome to everybody who is out in the audience today for our Ask the Expert seminar. I am Sarah Hibbs-Ship, the Managing Director for Communications at the Colorado State University Research Foundation, which houses the Tech Transfer Office for Colorado State University and all the associated campuses. Today, we have Shawn Stigler from Michael Best here with us, and we're very excited about that. At the very beginning, however, I do want to thank the CCTSI and the NIH REACH grant at the CU Anschutz Medical Campus, and also our partners at Venture Partners at CU Boulder. We are excited to work with the innovation offices and tech transfer offices across this ecosystem and host today's seminar. So today we have Shawn, as you can see, as I point right to my video screen, which doesn't help any of you, but he is managing partner at Michael Best and co-chair of Venture Best, which is Michael Best's startup arm of that, and brings some unique experience to this platform today. Prior to becoming an attorney that specializes in startups, Shawn was an entrepreneur and founder of Modus Law as well. And so he has expertise in this area from multiple sides of the bench, I think you could say. And so, Shawn, I'm going to hand it over to you to sort of start and tell the audience a little bit about yourself and how you got to where you are today.
No, absolutely. Well, first of all, great to see you again, Sarah, and thanks so much for the opportunity. And I do love, it makes me so happy to see all the universities working together and sharing. As you know, you and I know each other, and then I know Brad Bernthal well at CU and a lot of the team there, and then Scott at CSU. So it's just so cool to see all this collaboration and cross campus. My wife went to CU Denver to get her doctorate. So yeah, it's lots coming together. So I'm Shawn Stigler, and I think I have one of the funnest jobs in the world, where now I work with about half investors, university investment arms, corporate investment arms, family offices, venture capital funds, and then about half amazing, cool startup companies changing the world, which honestly a vast majority of the companies we work with are having a huge impact, whether it's clean tech, climate science, natural foods, whatever. It's really cool. And yeah, my background is, because I'm a triple nerd, I like to say. So I went to University of Wisconsin undergrad, and then I majored in accounting. So I'm a former Arthur Andersen tax accountant, and then also risk management and insurance, which was a great program we had at Wisconsin. Joan Schmidt heads that team, just one of the most amazing humans in the world. So kind of had a unique background. And then I worked for Arthur Andersen, just helping privately held businesses with different types of tax, finance, strategy, stuff like that. And I loved it. It was my first big exposure to the entrepreneur ecosystem in a pretty narrow lane. And it was one of those things where I was in Wisconsin still, and I always wanted to come to Colorado, like so many people. I just got my semi-native bumper sticker the other day, because I've been here 22 years now. So I think I've earned it. But yeah, always wanted to get out here. And so moved out, went to CU's law school. Didn't know a single person in Boulder when I moved out, and then worked for a little bit. And it was just at the time when, Denver, Fort Collins, Boulder, the entrepreneur ecosystem was just exploding, all the great stuff happening at CSU. Boulder had Foundry Group and Techstars and some of those sort of high profile folks. And so I just caught lightning in a bottle, started our firm with 2 people, leased a tiny office for $700 a month upstairs at an old building in Boulder. And yeah, grew that to like 15 folks. So I I've been in the situation where you're trying to figure out who to do payroll with. When do you need a 401k? How do you incentivize people? What phone system should you use? All those like startup things we did, which was great to be able to really resonate with clients. And so I had that firm, grew it to about 15, and then 4 years ago we merged into the Michael Best family, which is really I won't be a commercial for it, but we're here, Austin, North Carolina. See, I knew it. I upset you right away, Sarah. I talk a little bit about the firm. I'm kidding. Messing with you. Here, Austin, Salt Lake, Raleigh, Chicago, Madison, a bunch of really cool university towns. In particular, we have a focus on, and then entrepreneurial towns. So that is my life story. 4 minutes. Yeah.
That is amazing. And sorry, somebody walked by and opened my door, so I had to go close it. So.
We allow dogs in our office, so every once in a while, if I don't have mine totally closed, there's like a random dog on the camera. So yeah.
So thinking about that, you had possibly what is either the most desirable or the second most desirable acquisition, right, of your startup company. So you merged. You had services that were sufficient enough for somebody to want to acquire you, which I think in many ways is probably one of the most often selected paths by academic startups, right?
For sure.
Or technology in general for licensing and having somebody else assist with that who has greater infrastructure. So can you talk a little bit about that sort of concept of thinking about whether you maybe want to be acquired or whether you want to keep going, and how,
Sure.
and if it changes at all the structure for how you build your company, if your exit strategy is different?
Yeah, absolutely. No, it's a great question. I give a talk. In fact, I've given it at the Impact MBA program called Cocktail Party Advice. And I think a lot of us who are in the service industry, you say things, and just like if I was talking to a scientist or something, the vocabulary we use, we intentionally make really tricky and confusing so no one understands it. So you have to pay us a lot. Just kidding. But so people get the wrong impression of what they need to do. And I think, one of the things, there's so many of us who love supporting entrepreneurs. And so myself, others, anyone on my team, but just the community in general, ask questions. Like, we want to help, because I always say that the ounce of prevention goes further than a pound of cure. It was like invented for legal and accounting issues. So no, I mean, a couple things on that point. One, how you set up your company. We've worked with some amazing CSU companies. How you set up the company at the beginning is so important, and it's like not hard or expensive, but if you make the wrong fork. So, for example, a lot of times you'll hear, "I have to be a Delaware C corporation. I have to be." Well, not necessarily. CSU, CSURF and the team is very flexible, and sometimes you eventually have to transition. But if you're likely going to get acquired, if that's a very likely path, and we don't always know 100%, or you're really IP, intellectual property heavy, and we're going to license things, and we're going to relicense things or build things on. Man, a Delaware C Corp is just a really expensive, limiting, tough way to have a business. And so sometimes we'll start off as an LLC, which allows us, we can always convert to a Delaware C Corp, we can always convert to other things. But if you start as a Delaware C Corp or even a Colorado C Corp, you can never convert away. And so we've seen so many companies where they get this cocktail party advice, like, oh, just set up a Delaware C Corp. And then someone buys their assets, and then they have to pay double tax on that transaction. So they might, say it's just for round numbers, it's $1 million sale. They might only end up with $250,000, $300,000 of the proceeds net of tax. And if they're a company that exists for a long time, and is profitable. So a lot of like biotech companies or things like that, they can just exist in perpetuity. Maybe they have a strategic partnership with a pharma company or a med tech company or a vet tech company. They might make an investment and then the company just exists. Well, if you're a Delaware C-Corp, now you've just locked in double taxation forever. And so, and a whole bunch of other challenges. So I think, like so many things, just talking with someone who does it for a living, does it thousands of times, whether it's me or someone else, is just such a good way to make sure you build the right foundation. And I think, you know, your question about building for merger, I think, you know, we've seen it with so many of your great companies too, where there's challenges. You know, you get to a certain size, and sometimes it takes money, sometimes it takes resources, sometimes it takes network. And so being able to partner with maybe a Siemens or a, you know, we just did a really cool deal for a client with Jeep, like 4x4s, and they were doing fine, they were doing great, but like that just added fuel to the fire, took a lot of the admin burden, just like it did for me and my story. I didn't have to worry about the 401k or payroll or any of that stuff anymore. So, you know, that can be such a great path when it goes well, to just really help you get to the vision of what you want, and really focus on what your highest and best is without a lot of that admin. It can go wrong too. We certainly see that, but yeah. So hopefully that's a little helpful.
Mm-hmm. For those of you in the audience, we do have a question. Thank you. Zerui Wang, I hope I said that correctly, has a question. Do you mean that an LLC is better than a C Corp for a startup?
Yeah.
At the beginning.
Yeah, totally. So my general advice, and I probably should have some sort of disclaimer, like I don't know your situation, this is not actual legal advice, but what we generally tell folks is so the only big benefit of becoming a Delaware C Corp is it allows you to take institutional capital. So that's venture capital funds, certain endowment funds. They have to invest in C Corps. And sometime I can talk with you offline about why that is, but they generally have to invest in C Corps. Everyone else, including family offices, sometimes universities, sometimes even accelerators now, will at least do the initial funding into a LLC. And so that just gives you all the flexibility in the world to, again, reorganize the company. A lot of our companies, if they're IP heavy, what they'll do is they'll create what's called an IP holding company. So if there's a lot of intellectual property or ideas, we'll keep that all in a safe little company that doesn't do anything except own intellectual property. And then if they're making, you know, medical devices or drugs or something, we put that in a separate company. So if heaven forbid something bad happens there's a lawsuit, there's a bad outcome, the IP is still safe. And again, that's where a LLC is just perfect because it only pays one layer of tax, totally flexible. There's all sorts of cool things too, like Wyoming is a no tax state. So if you can, and they're very proactive, they invented the LLC. So some of our companies will organize in Wyoming because if they can source the income there, they don't have to pay state income tax. So these are all the little strategies, which it doesn't cost much money. It's actually cheaper to do an LLC than a C Corp. So I'm not trying to like jack up legal fees. So yeah, hopefully that was helpful. I can't say it's better. I got to say it depends because I'm a lawyer. So yeah.
So yeah, that was great. And thank you for putting in the question. If anybody else has questions, we are monitoring the Q&A as well as the chat. And so you're welcome to put your questions into the Q&A or the chat, and I will answer them, feed them in as best as we can. And so I'm curious, Shawn, you work with all three universities. I know we work with you quite a bit, and some of our higher profile startups are with you right now. but across this great ecosystem, right? Colorado keeps winning awards, and we keep we're going up in the ranks for funding and for startups and for diversity and women's startups and sorts of interesting things. What are some of the industries that you really see startups blooming in right now, and maybe what's some of your advice to the startup founders that are likely on the call today?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, stay strong is my first advice, because it's a rocky road sometimes. But hang in there and make sure you seek out, support and guidance, because it can be very lonely. It's one of the we have definitely some mental health challenges with entrepreneurs, because it can be a very lonely process. So I would say that first and foremost. But no, I think what I've seen, which I think is so cool, is the different communities honoring their history and their legacy, and building on that. And so even like the pump house at CSU, right? Like it had this sort of legacy energy element to it, but now it's like the hub of the clean energy movement at CSU. And I think what I've seen in particular in Colorado, lots of natural foods, which is a great market. And what sort of spins off that is food logistics. Like we work with some really cool artificial intelligence ordering platforms and logistics platforms to help do things not only more efficiently, but also greener, which is really, really cool from the logistics standpoint. So clean food, clean energy is huge. And just sustainability in general is huge in Colorado. I love seeing that. As I think we've talked about we give West Slope, I'll give a little plug. West Slope Startup Week is just a few weeks away now. And we've given now for several years the Female Founder of the Year award at that. And so 2 years ago, a great client, great friend, Olivia Peterson, who started Susteo. It's just one example. I kind of call it like the Credit Karma for sustainability. It helps you build a sustainability score. It helps you figure out ways you can improve your sustainability and lower your impact. So companies like that, first of all, I just love. And then second, they really do change the world. So that clean tech, sustainability, and then Boulder has a lot of just traditional SaaS companies, lots of B2B software. Foundry and Techstars have really helped support that ecosystem. CSU, we see so much with the ag tech, the vet tech. The agriculture technology that's come out of CSU is amazing, right? The carbon sequestration, so many things. The data monitoring, that's such an awesome way to move the needle. So I'd say, there's all different ecosystems here that are markets. And what I would tell the entrepreneurs is make sure you do something that you're passionate about. Like you don't have to fit the square peg in the round hole. You don't have to do what you're supposed to do or what's easy. I think, do you. And the great thing about versus 20 years ago when we started doing this, there's actually a lot of money here now. I think that's been one of the biggest challenges. Is it used to be we'd have all these startups and they'd maybe raise their friends and family round or their seed round, which is usually, back then it was like 100 grand. Now it's like $500,000. Inflation happens, but and then they would have to go to Palo Alto or New York or Boston, and that's not really the case anymore. You can stay here, you can grow a company, and what's cool about that is then, like some of our mutual friends, Sarah, like then when the exit happens, the money comes back to Fort Collins. Then those almost every time the entrepreneurs reinvest in the community, they become angel investors, they become seed investors. So it's just such a beautiful cycle when you see it happen.
Do you mentioned, well, actually we have a question. So the LLC to C-Corp is a great question starter here. Floyd said to convert an LLC to a C-Corp, is a tax letter opinion typically required, or are investors currently comfortable with it being a tax-free conversion?
Yep. Great question, Floyd. Just drop in the technical questions at me here. No, 99% of the time it's tax-free. There's certain things you can do when you are a LLC to make it difficult. So if you talk to someone who does this for a living, we'll make sure you don't do those difficult things. But no, it's funny. I was just down the hall talking to a colleague of mine about those conversions. And yeah, it's usually, like I always tell our clients, if you start as an LLC and then, Andreessen comes to you and says, we want to give you $50 million, but we need you to be a C-Corp, we could have you converted to a Delaware C-Corp in 4 or 5 days, maybe even a little less, like if we really had to. It's almost always tax-free. It's not a particularly high cost. So yeah.
Oh, we started on the right question, I will tell you.
Touched a nerve, yeah.
Right. Charmant Musada is asking, Colorado does not recognize public benefit LLC. Can a standard LLC operate as a PB LLC? And what is the most effective manner for an LLC to function as a public benefit entity in Colorado?
That's a great question. So I will say, truthfully, and feel free to DM me, and obviously I won't charge anyone for this, but my colleague Beth Prendergast, which I can follow up however we do, Sarah, if people want the notes, or otherwise just folks can reach out to me, I'll introduce you. She's amazing, and she runs our benefit, nonprofit benefit, social good practice here at the firm, and she's worked with hundreds and hundreds of companies in this space. So a couple things. So Modus, my old company, we were just doing the B certification right as we were, or certified B Corp, right as we were doing the merger. And I actually love that process. So for those who don't know, it's not a governmental filing, because all a benefit corporation does is it allows the company not to have the main priority of the leadership be maximizing shareholder value. It allows you to take in other considerations like carbon impact, diversity, inclusion, other elements other than maximizing profits. That's simplifying, but that's really all the public benefit corporation does. Versus a B certification, you see the little it almost looks like an at with a B. It's a test you take, and so you have to say, oh, we use local vendors. This is our parental leave program. This is how we actively recruit underrepresented people in this area, and you get points, and you have to get I forget how many points you have to get, but it's a fair amount. And so I really like that process because it makes you actually, as an organization, be really intentional about being a good company, frankly. So we still look at that regularly. You do eventually have to become a public benefit corporation. I think within 2 years is the last I checked. But yeah, honestly, that's not my total area of expertise. So I would punt that one to Beth, but I know some companies are operating as LLCs and still figuring out a way to do it. So
awesome. You used obviously the public good, right? The benefit concept, but also you mentioned some of those spectacular diversity words that we are all being faced with, and is just becoming an ever increasing challenge for everybody to adopt and and deal with and focus on moving forward into the future. Are there, in sort of that traditional startup concept, are there changes that are happening right now that make it easier or more difficult or to navigate the startup world and ensure that you're on the right side of those considerations as you move
Yep.
forward.
Yep. No, absolutely. I mean, I think a few things come to mind on that front. First of all, there are amazing people doing work. The Moxie Project is actually Jen Henderson, who we both know, who founded Tilt, which is actually another example, which I'll come back to. But there are getting to be more and more resources for those who are passionate about it and want to do the right thing. Part of it is like sometimes people, I think, feel they don't have the tools or know where to go. So I do think that part, there's a group we work with called I can put it in the notes later, but I think it's called the Diversity Project out of North Carolina. And that's really cool as well, just about language, messaging, and then also resources to try and attract underrepresented candidates. So I think that's part of it. And then I think it does take intentionality. Unfortunately, like you and I were kind of talking beforehand, part of the issue is there aren't enough candidates coming through the system to get to the PhD level or the Juris Doctorate level, or my wife is a PsyD, like that level. And so I think what we have to do is go downstream and try and really incentivize, educate, create a pathway for folks, probably starting in high school, right? To you have the Make a Dream Foundation, there's other organizations that really try and showcase the opportunity for folks to have these careers, because sometimes they don't have a model of an aunt or an uncle who was a doctor or a lawyer or whatever. And so it just doesn't seem possible. So I think that's one of the things I stress a lot, and it's not cool or it doesn't get as much press as our scholarships or things like that. But we, our managing partner of the whole firm, created this great program where I think it's 14 or 16 high school students from underrepresented communities come into the law firm every summer and see all the different aspects of the law firm, whether it's marketing or finance or HR, just to get them that experience and get them that exposure, and also being a lawyer too. But so I think things like that are so important to whether it's our world, the startup world is both the finance. I mean, it's horrible. There's just no other way to put it. Like last time I checked, I think 9 or 10% of all financing went to, women or diverse founders. The deals, the number of investments is getting better, but the dollar amount is horrible. And so just like the money getting built in Fort Collins and Boulder, and we need to keep supporting that ecosystem. And so if you look at my LinkedIn, we work with a number of funds that only invest in those communities, those founders. And so we need to keep doing that, right? We need to keep filling the pipes, because unfortunately in the startup world, money matters a lot. And so if people aren't getting the finances and getting their story out, the companies die. So sorry, that was very meandering, but hopefully touched on a couple of other things.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So I'm going to feed off of something you said a moment before this. We have expertise sectors, right? So there's some expertise sectors that happen to be at CU Boulder, and then there are some that happen to be at CSU, and obviously at the Anschutz Medical Campus as our regional medical campus. And do you find now, as we sort of move forward into this new world that we all have, that the technologies or innovations that might have once been very sector specific are now being applied in other sectors? And I'll give you an example. I was talking with Emily Klein at Venture Partners, and we were talking about clean energy
Okay.
and funding in clean energy, and how that might, or folks who specialize in what would have been traditional clean energy concepts, how that might now not be discipline specific, and you can apply it to pharmaceutical development, or you can apply it to medical device manufacturing, and all of these other areas that might be at the different campuses, but they don't necessarily think of themselves as being a clean energy focus.
No, 100%. And forgive me, Sarah, I'm going to go back one little thing about the diversity, because we actually sponsored Raj to speak at Innisphere a while back, but there's a great gentleman named Raj Chaudhary who was part of the Tulsa, the Move to Tulsa campaign for distributed workforces. And I think one other thing about diversity and looking for diverse opportunities is, now that we're much more of a hybrid work environment as a culture, first of all, he did great research on trailing spouses, which is, it's in the Harvard Business Review if anyone wants to look, but that was something really fascinating to me, is like the effect of historically women having to follow, it's wrong, but that's what it was, their spouse who made more, and then they had to keep rebooting their careers. So he has some awesome research about the power of hybrid work environments. And I know Fort Collins has seen a lot of that influx from other places, and people are making Fort Collins home, which is cool too. But no, on the cross-discipline, it's funny, I give books to clients all the time, or people who make introductions. And one of my favorite ones is a book called Range by Derek Epstein. And it's actually all about how almost all the good innovations, all the really high-end musicians, artists, not all, but a lot, actually synthesize different elements of their background. Maybe they were a music major, but that allowed them, when they were further, to figure out some physics invention or something like that. And so it's one of the things, like the cross-campus event we were at together a month or two ago, and then CU has the CU New Venture Challenge, which I loved, which was this cross-campus, entrepreneurship collaboration and competition. So no, we're seeing that all the time. I work with some really cool space companies that are working with photovoltaic and laser companies that are based on like organic fuel disposal or fuel cells and stuff like that. So the more I think people who are passionate about innovation talk to each other and sort of share ideas, because like we always come back to, we want people to operate at their highest and best. And you have some genius ideas that I don't know that much about, but when we're in the room together, or we're talking about things, or we're sharing what we're working on, like that's how things really level up. Like if you look at so many things. And so, yeah, I think some of the universities, School of Mines, Anschutz, CSU is so famous for the veterinary side and the ag side, but we're seeing those permutations infiltrate so many other industries. And again, a lot of times the biggest innovations come that 1 degree of separation, or like as a synergistic part. And that's some of my favorite stuff to get to work on. So.
Awesome, thank you. Yeah, and if any of you in the audience, you don't have to ask a question on something we're actually talking about. You are welcome to ask your own questions, and you are also welcome to go back to the LLC C-Corp question. So,
well, and I would just add on because we talked a little bit about the formation side, and I would say the one thing I always really stress to founders, and you've seen this a ton, Sarah, is first of all, get some agreement between the founders on who owns what, who's doing what, who contributed what, because if you don't start that process early, then I say, even if things go really well, you'll fight. If things go wrong, you'll fight. Like, having that constitution of the company, it's like a business prenup. It just makes sure everyone's on the same page, and kind of has the same expectations. I give the example of, I was a tax accountant for a long time, and so when I'm working with founders and other investment companies that I'm part of, they're like, "Oh, Shawn's an accountant. He'll want to do the books." And it's like, I'd rather jump off a bridge than do accounting. Like, that's why I stopped being an accountant. And so very often, especially when you have technical skill sets for founders, people say, "Oh, Sarah knows how to do this, or Jenny knows how to do that. She'll just do that." And it's like, well, spending a little time to make sure you set out the roles and responsibilities is so important. It's how almost all the bad business breakups start. And then the other key thing, which intersects a lot with your world, Sarah, is the intellectual property. So when we're talking about, obviously our audience here is largely in the tech world, getting that stuff buttoned up early is so important. And so I literally just had a call 20 minutes ago where a really cool client has a great technology, but in order to get the investment, he had to do an IP assignment of everything he had done personally into the company. And so the more you can just have that hygiene, and it doesn't mean paying a lawyer or accountant a bunch of money, it's just kind of being proactive about some of this stuff. It'll save you so much money in the future. Like, I could tell you so many horror stories of companies where things were sloppy or they didn't get this stuff done right, and then it either stopped them from going public or stopped the financing or caused the founders to hate each other, and that's not what you want. So just to throw that out on the early stage side. Yeah.
Well, so you just led me into my next question, and I don't know that you actually meant to do that, but I think everyone in the world knows that really good quality legal, and sometimes bad quality legal, can be incredibly expensive. And so as you mentioned, right, like it can save you money in the long run, or you could make it more affordable. So what are maybe your top 3 or 4 things that academic founders who I will, and I apologize to everyone in the office and on this call, right, who are not necessarily known to be brief, need to keep in mind that makes having a valuable attorney a real value add, and not just an expensive line item in books.
Absolutely. No, I think it's like when I visit some of our clients, and they're just infinitely smarter than I am, but also they're in some field that is just outside my wheelhouse, and it's really intimidating. And I imagine if I were, a carbon scientist or a computer designer or, a veterinarian or whatever it is, talking to a lawyer, first of all, it doesn't seem that fun. It's boring. But second of all, it might be intimidating, or it's like going to the dentist. And I would say, hopefully, there's the people who work in our world, the entrepreneur world, generally are pretty nice, and like, we're not chasing ambulances and saying heretofore and things like that a lot. So I would say, come to us early and often. Like, the vast majority of us in this space, unless you abuse it, we're really passionate about you succeeding. Like, the analogy I always give is, our clients are the architects. You're designing something cool, you're innovating, you're creating the first ever X. Lawyers and accountants are plumbers, right? Like, we make sure the water works and things end up where they're supposed to. And those of us who have done this stuff tens of thousands of times, you can tell us a fact pattern, and we can just like a lot of folks in their field, if you went to a doctor or whatever, they say, I have a runny nose and my ear hurts and this, the doctor's like, this is what you have. We're the same way. So come to us early and often. And I think a lot of us, like, what we do is we create a menu for our clients, and we'll put together, okay, right now, you don't really need a trademark and you don't need an incentive option plan. Those are things you might want to deal with later. For now, let's just do, let's get the LLC set up. Let's get the IP assignment. Let's just start there, And so I think pushing your lawyer do things in morsels. Like we always call it triage law, because our clients don't have infinite resources. So I think lean on your attorneys or your accountants or your, any of your advisors. If you're a software company, maybe your developers, like you can't have everything at day one. So push them, in a constructive way. And then, yeah, go early and often, and then work with someone who does this work. Like we see this all the time where, so we represent, like sometimes we'll represent a restaurant or an endodontist or something like that. And an S corporation, which is a certain tax election you make for a corporation, subchapter S, is a great option for that. But it's a horrible option for a venture-backed company or a company that wants to be venture-backed or go through explosive growth. And so you'll come across clients, unfortunately, who, again, get that cocktail party advice, who's like, oh yeah, I set up tons of companies. You should be an S corp. It'll save you taxes. And then it'll cost them tens of thousands of dollars to fix, and could cost way more depending on the eventual outcome. So don't be scared of us. That's find someone you're not scared of. Yeah.
So do you, obviously this is hosted by the Innovation Corps and CCTSI and both of the tech transfer offices at CSU and then at CU Boulder. And we work with you as the tech transfer office as well, right? And I know the other universities do also. Do you find that you get a substantial amount of your business sort of through that tech transfer concept, or is it external to academic startups, and is it booming everywhere, not just inside academia?
Yeah, we certainly, we're really fortunate. I think you and I have talked about this. Like our firm is originally from Wisconsin. And Wharf out of University of Wisconsin was kind of one of the original tech transfers. And so we were lucky enough to kind of be a part of that. And so it's been a long part of our history. And now we're in North Carolina, Chicago, Salt Lake. So you can do the math about some other people we work with. And so it's a big part of our business. And truthfully, I love it because there's no better source of innovation than our universities. And I'm a public university guy, and so I've seen a lot of that. So I'm also a little biased towards that. I love it. So it's a big portion. It's also a lot, there's a lot of companies in Fort Collins that we work with that aren't part of the university as well. And I think the university also gives us a platform, like we talked about earlier, to help support diversity and support some things that maybe aren't getting funded or aren't getting funded as much as we'd like. And, you guys are at the tip of the spear of that. So you already have great structures and processes in place, and we can just sort of add to that. And then so often, speaking with you or Scott or Reno or, so many people involved in the university, we just get connected with other people in the community. And same thing happens in Boulder and Denver. No, I think, you said it's booming everywhere, which kind of caught my ear. And we just had a call with all of our leadership. And it's a very interesting time for entrepreneurs because I think late stage exits first quarter were down 84%. So the late stage world is having a moment. Like what was the last IPO you've heard about in the tech space? Like it's been a minute. My awesome partner, Melissa Turkson, I think she did the last really big unicorn deal that I know of. It was a $230 million, it's public, I'm not talking out of school, $230 million deal, but I haven't heard of another deal that size in a month or two. There's just not much happening. Conversely, there's a record amount of fundraising or capital that's been raised, especially in early and growth and mid-stage, which is where Colorado excels. And so I would just say a little bit, like if you listen to TechCrunch or This Week in Startups or some of the like ecosystem podcasts, which I'm a huge nerd for, you could think the sky's falling and now's not a good time to be an entrepreneur. But I would just tell everyone, there's more early stage money available for investment right now than there ever has been in history. And so I will tell you from working with a bunch of funds, they're a little nervous, they're being a little more cautious, but they're not, like in 2009 and 10, we saw all these aggressive terms come into term sheets. And it's another great thing about working with universities is like, you're good people, you're not trying to stick it to people and take advantage. And our funds and family offices are the same way. They want to be in it for the long haul. They want to have a good reputation. So, but there's a little more diligence, a little more time. Valuations are getting compressed. So I would say know that. But then also there has been a proliferation of funds that are much more mindful about the societal impacts and societal goals of what they're doing. And so you always want to be honest, but supporting those things, having a diverse founder group, doing all those things is a huge positive right now, which is a good thing.
So I'm just thinking about diversity because that is a big push at every university and definitely through NSF and NIH, which is where universities get quite a bit of their funding, and especially startups and grants as well. And what I know you've mentioned to me about several different sorts of initiatives that Michael Best offers and works with. But would you share them with the rest of the audience? Sure. Well, for things to look out for, or if you're really interested in something that Shawn mentions about connecting and bringing to your campus for things.
Absolutely. I'll say one prefatory thing, and then I'll actually, to not be a lawyer, I'll answer your question. But one of the things I've really loved seeing is now we generally don't work with a ton of huge clients. We tend to be a lot of privately held, mid-sized emerging companies, but some of the big clients and some of even the mid-size, now when they are interviewing us to help them, one of the elements is the diversity of the service team, which I love, right? Because it forces not just us, but everyone in our industry to like I said before, like money drives a lot. And so I'm not saying it's Microsoft because it's not, but like if Microsoft is like, hey, you have to have at least this much diversity on your service team in order to work with us, well, these big law firms are going to make that happen, right? So I am emboldened that is starting to happen. For us, we do a lot of the traditional scholarships, things like that. But one of the things I love, again, talk about filling the pipeline, is I think it's over 10 years old, might even be a little older than that, but we started it in Wisconsin, and now we're expanding it to Colorado, Utah, and the Research Triangle in North Carolina. But we are hiring first summer interns out of engineering, science. So our firm has about 150 intellectual property attorneys, but then it has another 50 or 60 botanists, scientists, PhDs, tons and tons of engineers. And so we really, because we do so much intellectual property work, we like to have really high-end people that aren't even lawyers, because we're boring and a pain, as I mentioned. So the best of the best, working on really cool stuff, really cool scientific, pharmaceutical, clean energy, space, whatever things. It's a really cool way to use a degree in this background. And so we're expanding to Colorado and looking to create engineering and science hubs on some of the universities to hire students, first as internships for the summer. And then, I didn't have a lot of resources when I was in school. And so being able to work through the school year was also great. It helped me pay. I worked for 2 different professors and a law firm when I was in law school, and same thing at undergrad. So we want to make sure we give that opportunity to those who want it to work through the year. So it's a high focus on diverse candidates who want to do engineering, science, other types of things during the summer, and then we'll hire you full time afterwards if we all decide that's the best path. And that's a great career, and you get to work on, I'm not going to name drop, but some really cool space companies, really cool ag companies, really cool software companies, like stuff you hear about on the news. It's pretty fun. So some people just love that, but then some people want to go to law school. And so we'll pay for law school for people in this program. And then as long as you stay 3 years, we forgive the loan. So again, it's another way to go down earlier in people's educational careers, give people opportunities, and then pay for their law school if that's what they want. But if not, it's just a great career to use that PhD or scientific background. So yeah, it's been an awesome program. So I'm excited now we're bringing it to Colorado too.
That's really cool. I do want to offer up to the audience. We have about 9 minutes left, and we've covered a wide range, right? From pretty intense corporation questions at the very beginning to diversity and student engagement and professional development opportunities. If there's anything we haven't answered or that you want us to bring up, please drop it in the chat or the questions. And then I think, Shawn, one of my last questions that you can work on until somebody asks one, is if there are maybe 3 things that you would be thrilled knowing that people walked away from this seminar knowing today, what would those 3 really big points be?
I think the first one is, if you're working on a new idea, a new venture, a new potential company, reach out to people in the ecosystem early and often. Again, like I'm always happy to have a half-hour call with anyone doing something positive, or anyone in the entrepreneurial ecosystem, no charge. I won't try and sell you anything, I promise. I'll just coach you. And I think that's how the vast majority of us are. But that half hour could could make the difference between success and failure. And it could save you tens of thousands of dollars down the road. So reach out to accountants, lawyers, your community early and often. I think the second thing is, it's an amazing time to be an entrepreneur. You have amazing resources like yourself, like Scott Schrake, like Brad Bernthal, all the ecosystems. And I think also you can learn so much, whether it's podcasts, YouTube channels, things like that. So it's also, you're not in a vacuum of having to figure out all this stuff on your own. Not just the legal and accounting, but just, who are good co-founders? What are issues coming up? You'll hear terms like 409A valuation or QSBS or things like that. And if you're in that ecosystem, it can be overwhelming. So I think, reaching out to other people in that ecosystem too. And I think the third thing I would say, which we didn't really talk about specifically, but this is the other big Achilles heel I see with founders, is it's really easy to give up part of your company and it's really hard to give it back. And so I cannot tell you the hundreds of times someone says, oh, my cousin Joey is going to do our website for us. I'm giving him 5% of the company to do that or whatever. And then they've kind of flake. You don't have a company set up yet. They don't do what they're supposed to, or maybe they do. And then all of a sudden, the company does great. Joey comes out of the woodwork. I want my 5%, which maybe you promise them, and that's its own issue. So be really judicious about giving up ownership in your company. Don't just throw it around, because especially if you have to raise capital or grow, that has an exponential effect on how much you get to own later. And whew, I can just tell you so many horror stories about that. So yeah, slightly buzzkill on the last one, but yeah, 2 positive, 1 negative. So.
Well, and that is one of the things in academic startups is at the beginning, right? You usually have grant money, you have some university funding, or potentially in Colorado we have great funding through OEdit.
Yeah, absolutely.
Advanced industry proof of concept grants that they put forth to the universities and small businesses, and all of those are non-dilutive. And so we do have that opportunity, but it's when you get past that very first product and you're really trying to expand that becomes the challenge. So
yeah, no, 100%. No, you said it so well, Sarah. Yeah. And the good news is there's so many, full disclosure, they're not for like very early stage companies, but there's Bigfoot Capital in Boulder, there's Espresso Capital, there's all sorts of baseline growth capital. One of the cool things about watching the ecosystem evolve is you don't have to give up 35% of your company every time you need to raise capital. There's all these non-dilutive investment structures now. And so that's been something that's so gratifying to me, as these folks who have just put blood, sweat, and tears into companies to get to keep more of it. And to be clear, a lot of times that's the employees and it's not just the one founder who's keeping it all. It might be 50 people who now get to own more of the company because there is more to share. So, yeah.
Very exciting. Is there, I don't see any other questions popping in. Is there anything you can think of that I didn't ask, or that you haven't shared yet, or?
Yeah, I think the only other thing that kind of popped up when you were asking earlier is, for those, a lot of the folks who are going to need to grow a company will need to raise capital. And while that's really stressful and you need to get the capital raised, I think also being really thoughtful and talking to the community, whether it's lawyers, people like yourself, people who have raised capital, make sure you know who your investors are. Again, we're incredibly fortunate in Colorado. 95% of the community here, and sort of that plays in our space, that isn't just located here, are really good people trying to do good things. They need to make money to keep their funds going, but they're not like the gotcha types that sometimes we see on the coast. But be really careful about who you take money from and what their influence is going to be on your company.
Yeah. So we have about 2 minutes left. So I think I'm going to wrap up. I really want to thank you for taking the time today. I've now seen you at a couple of events, and I know you are around regularly at all of the campuses. And so, and to everyone in the audience, Shawn was not kidding. You can see his email is his name at the moment. So please feel free to reach out to him if you do have legal questions or just want some feedback. He also does some crazy great volunteering. So stalk him on LinkedIn and ask him volunteering questions as well. It's pretty cool. And to all of you here, thank you so much. And we appreciate all that you do in our vibrant ecosystem. So have a wonderful Monday to everyone.
Yeah, thanks so much, Sarah. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you all very much. Have a good day.
Have a great day.